When I got diagnosed with a chronic illness, my mother-in-law walked into the hospital room with a cup of coffee and said, "You've always looked sickly. Maybe it's karma for wasting our son's life." She told the nurses she was my emergency contact, then signed me out without my consent. I sat on the bench outside for 6 hours, shaking. That was the last time she saw me helpless. The next time she heard my name, it was attached to something that made her collapse in her driveway. I was diagnosed on a Wednesday. The doctors called it an autoimmune condition, chronic, progressive. A lifetime of managing symptoms, pain, medications, and exhaustion. They didn't sugarcoat it, but they didn't offer much comfort either. Just facts and a few pamphlets that I couldn't bring myself to read. My husband wasn't there when they told me. He said work had a deadline, and I told him not to worry. I still believed we were a team back then. I was alone in the hospital room, staring at a crack in the ceiling, when the door opened. It wasn't him. It was his mother. She strolled in like she owned the place, holding a Starbucks cup and wearing her usual perfume, the kind that clings to your throat. Her heels clicked on the tile floor. She didn't sit down. She didn't ask how I was. She looked me up and down. Her eyes were cold. Then she said it. "You've always looked sickly. Maybe this is karma for wasting our son's life." I didn't say anything. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. The words hit harder than I thought they would. She was always sharp with me, but this wasn't passive-aggressive. This was something else. She sipped her coffee and turned to the nurse by the door. "I'm her emergency contact. We're checking her out." The nurse looked confused. I was confused. But I didn't have the strength to argue, and she spoke with the kind of confidence that made people listen. My chart was on the counter.
She pointed at it.
"Sign her out. She wants to go home." The nurse hesitated. "Ma'am, we need confirmation from the patient. She's disoriented," my mother-in-law snapped. "She told me she wants to leave." I tried to speak, to say no, but my voice was small. My hands were shaking. I felt like I was underwater. They wheeled me out 20 minutes later.
No discharge summary.
No follow-up instructions.
No medication.
She dropped me off on a bench outside the hospital. Didn't even wait to see if someone came for me. "I hope this teaches you something," she said as she got into her car. "Don't pretend to be helpless just to trap a man." Then she drove away. It was summer, but I couldn't stop shaking. I sat on that bench for 6 hours. No phone.
No wallet.
No idea what to do. My hospital bracelet was still on. My forebandage was bleeding a little. I kept my arms crossed over my chest, hoping someone would notice. No one did. Eventually, a nurse coming off shift recognized me and called a cab from her own phone. I gave the driver my home address. My hands wouldn't stop trembling the entire ride. I felt humiliated. Filthy. Like I had been thrown away. When I got home, my husband was already there. He was mad. Not at her, but at me. He said I should have stayed. That I was making things worse. That his mother was just trying to help. That night, I stared at the ceiling again. Same crack. Different room. And I knew something inside me had changed. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. But I decided right then that I was done playing the part everyone expected of me. 2 days later, I changed the locks. 3 days after that, I changed my emergency contact and filed paperwork to remove my mother-in-law from anything medical. I started to write. Quietly. Anonymously. At first, it was just journal entries. Then blog posts. I wrote about illness. About being silenced. About what it feels like when people think your pain is inconvenient. People read it. A lot of people. I didn't use my real name. I wasn't ready for that. But the stories were real.
Raw.
Honest. Other women commented. Some shared their own versions. Some said they cried reading mine. One post went viral. Then another. A nonprofit reached out. Then a journalist. Still, I kept my identity hidden. Until one day, a podcast invited me to speak. They said I could use my real name or not. But something in me was tired of hiding. So I said yes. And I told the story. All of it. I talked about the hospital. about the bench, about the woman who called herself family but treated me like trash. I named her. I didn't scream.
I didn't rant.
I just told the truth. They aired the episode 3 weeks later. It didn't explode right away, but it spread. People started sharing it, listening,
Commenting.
submitting it to forums and newsletters. I didn't look at the numbers at first. But then the emails came in. Strangers, supporters, survivors. And then one call. My ex-husband. I didn't answer. The voicemail was short. His voice was shaking. She collapsed in the driveway, he said. After the neighbor told her he heard your name on that podcast, he asked me to take it down. Said it was destroying their family. But I wasn't the one who destroyed it. I haven't replied. Not yet. The voicemail stayed on my phone for days. I played it once, then again. His voice cracked halfway through. He didn't sound angry this time. He sounded scared, like something was slipping out of his hands.
I didn't respond.
But I watched the podcast numbers climb. 1.2 million plays in a week. Messages kept flooding in, people saying I was brave, that my story mattered, that they had lived through something similar. Women who had been ignored, dismissed, punished for being sick, for being vulnerable, for being inconvenient. I didn't feel brave. I felt tired. But the kind of tired that gives you focus. Like all the noise had fallen away, and only the truth was left. Then came the email from the podcast team. Just a heads up, they wrote. Local news is picking it up. They want to do a segment. I told them I'd think about it. That same day, my old mailbox, one I hadn't touched since the divorce, lit up. A cease and desist letter. It was from her, my ex-mother-in-law, through her lawyer. She claimed defamation. Said my accusations were false and malicious, that I had caused irreparable harm to her name, her family, and her standing in the community. I read the letter once, then tore it in half. There was no lawsuit, just a threat, just noise. The truth didn't care about her reputation, but the pressure was building. A friend I hadn't heard from in years called me. She was crying. I didn't know what you were going through, she said. I just thought you were distant. I didn't know they isolated you. That word, isolated, sat heavy in my chest. Because that's what they did, didn't they?
Slowly.
Quietly. Making me doubt my own feelings. Making me feel like a burden. Making me feel like I was lucky they even tolerated me. I started to remember things I'd buried. Her comments at dinners. Are you really not going to eat? The way she offered to help but never followed through. How she told my husband, more than once, that I was draining him. She'd been chipping away at me for years. And I let her. But not anymore. A week later, the journalist who first wrote about my blog reached out again. I've got something you might want to see, she said. It was a screenshot. A private Facebook group post. A message from a woman who said she used to work as a nurse at the same hospital where I was signed out. I remember her, the post said. I didn't say anything back then, but I always thought something was off. The mother-in-law talked to one of the attending physicians like they were old friends. She said she knew the right people. Got the paperwork pushed through. I'm almost sure it was illegal. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I replied to the journalist, "Get me the name of the physician." 3 days later, I had it. A man with ties to a foundation my ex's family donated to. A friend of the family, listed on event programs and gala invitations. It wasn't just personal anymore. It was power. Quietly abused. Pulled strings. Skipped protocol. I called a lawyer. Not to sue.
Not yet.
But to ask questions. I wanted to know what my rights were. What they'd taken. What kind of complaint I could file, even after all this time. He listened. Then he asked, "Do you want this to go public?" I paused. I hadn't answered that question yet. Not fully. But every time I thought about that bench, about my body shaking, about the nurses who didn't believe me, about the man who told me to stay quiet, about the woman who threw me away, the answer felt closer. And I hadn't even started telling the real story yet. A week after I spoke to the lawyer, I got an anonymous package at my door. No return address. Just a plain manila envelope. Inside, copies of hospital paperwork. discharge forms, internal emails, a typed note. You didn't imagine it. Keep going. I stared at the papers, my hands numb. The discharge form had my signature, but it wasn't mine. I knew my own handwriting. This wasn't even close. The emails were worse. One of them was between the attending physician and someone from administration. It was short, casual. She's being difficult. MIL says they want her out ASAP. Use the side door. I felt sick. I took everything to the lawyer. He looked through the files, his face tight. This is forgery, he said. And if this is how they removed you from care, there could be criminal exposure here. I should have felt powerful, but mostly I felt small, like I was cracking open something bigger than I understood. He asked if I had any idea who sent the documents. I didn't. Not yet. But I had a guess. There was one nurse from that day, middle-aged, quiet, the one who'd looked unsure when my mother-in-law gave the order to discharge me. She looked back at me twice as I was wheeled out.
Her name tag had said L. Reese.
I made a note to try and find her. While the lawyer began putting things together, the journalist kept digging. She called me late one night. Her voice was shaking. You're not going to like this, she said. But you need to know. She'd found something in a local court archive. A sealed custody case from years ago. Nothing public. But the names matched. My ex-husband, my mother-in-law, and a girl, a child, born when my ex was 17. I couldn't speak. Are you saying?
Yes, she said.
It looks like there was a custody fight. Your ex signed over parental rights. The mother raised her. A sister. Or a daughter. Hidden. It made sense now how my mother-in-law always acted like her son was her second chance. Her only chance. Why she clung to him like that. Why she treated me like a threat. Because I was. She'd built her whole life around controlling him.
He wasn't allowed to have a past.
Or a future that didn't serve her. And I had gotten in the way. I didn't know what to do with that information. So I did what I always did now, I wrote. I didn't say anything about the girl. Not yet. But I hinted at it. Just enough. The podcast host reached out again. Said they were planning a follow-up episode. Wanted to know if I'd speak again. I said yes. This time, I wouldn't just talk about survival. I'd talk about cover-ups.
Fraud.
Abuse of power. And I'd name names again. But before I could record, another letter came. This one was handwritten. From my ex. I didn't know she did that to you. I swear. But if you go forward with this, there are things you don't understand. Please call me. He included a phone number. I didn't call. But I read that letter over and over. Things you don't understand.
Please.
What else was buried? And how far would they go to keep it that way? I didn't call him. Not right away. But I couldn't stop thinking about what he wrote. There are things you don't understand. So I did what I always do. I searched. I went through old documents, photos, social media posts from years back. I looked for the girl, the hidden daughter, a face that might match his, hers. And I found her. Her name was Hannah. She was 19. Quiet like me. A student. Smart. She posted about books, nature, mental health. I stared at her pictures for a long time. She didn't look like my ex. But there was something in her eyes. A sadness that felt familiar. I didn't message her. Not yet. Instead, I called the number he left. He picked up on the first ring. I hadn't heard his voice in almost a year. He sounded older. Like someone who hadn't slept in weeks.
He didn't ask how I was.
He just said, I didn't know she forged the paperwork. You didn't ask, I said. He went quiet. I told him I knew about Hannah. He didn't deny it.
She's my sister, he said.
At least. That's what I was always told.
But yeah.
I think she's mine. She was taken from me before I could decide anything. That was the first honest thing he'd ever said to me. Then he added, if you go public with this, you'll ruin her too. That's when I knew he was still his mother's son. Trying to make me feel guilty. Trying to wrap someone else's safety around his shame. But Hannah didn't deserve that. She didn't choose any of it. So, I made a different choice. I messaged her. I told her who I was, what I'd been through. I said I didn't want anything from her. I just thought she deserved to know the truth. She replied 3 days later. Her message was short, careful. I always wondered why things felt wrong. Thank you for telling me. Please don't stop. That was all I needed. I gave the lawyer everything. The forged forms, the emails, the anonymous note, the witness statements from nurses we'd tracked down, the story of Hannah, the podcast follow-up. The journalist wrote a second piece, this one with names, timelines, and evidence. The article dropped on a Monday. The headline, Power, Silence, and a Hospital Bench. One woman's fight to be heard. It spread fast. Local news. Then national. The hospital launched an internal investigation. The physician who signed my discharge was placed on leave. Then fired. His license was reviewed. Eventually he lost it. My mother-in-law's nonprofit pulled her name from the board. Her image was stripped from newsletters, websites, walls. Her friends stopped returning her calls. Donations dried up. She went quiet, too quiet, until the third podcast aired. In that one, I read the forged form aloud. I told the audience how it felt to be dragged out of a hospital while still bleeding. How I sat alone. How no one came. How that kind of silence changes a person forever. I didn't cry, but my voice broke once. That was the moment people remembered. By the end of the month, the podcast hit 4 million plays. The story wasn't just mine anymore. It became a symbol for women in hospitals, for patients with invisible pain, for anyone who had ever been told to be quiet and get over it. But the best part? The final piece? It came when I got another letter, handwritten, this time from Hannah. I confronted her. She broke down, said I was never supposed to know, said you were a threat. I told her she was the threat. I'm moving out. Thank you for setting me free. I folded the letter carefully and put it in a drawer. I didn't need to frame it. I already felt it in my chest every time I breathed. As for me, I got better. Not all at once. Some damage never heals the way you want it to. But I got stronger. I started teaching workshops. I built a support network for women with chronic illness. I stopped apologizing for my pain. I stopped hiding. One day, I walked past the hospital where it all began. I didn't go in. But I sat on the same bench. Only this time, I wasn't shaking. I was steady.
Calm.
And for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for anyone to come and save me. Because I had already saved myself. And the people who tried to break me, they now lived with the truth. Every day. That was the real revenge. They lost control. And I found my voice.